The Haunted Doll Collection. Ruby had always been fascinated by the supernatural and the paranormal. She loved reading eerie stories and watching horror movies, but nothing could prepare her for what she was about to experience when she stumbled upon a collection of 10 haunted dolls in an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. It was a dark and stormy night when Ruby decided to explore the dilapidated mansion. The wind howled ominously as she pushed open the creaky door and stepped into the musty interior. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the only source of light came from the flickering candle she held in her trembling hand. As Ruby made her way through the dimly lit hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The walls seemed to whisper to her, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. But it was when she entered the parlor that she saw them. 10 eerie dolls lined up on a dusty shelf, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the darkness. Each doll had a distinct aura of malevolence, as if they were imbued with the spirits of the restless dead. Ruby felt a chill run down her spine as she approached the dolls, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out a trembling hand to touch one of them, and as soon as her fingers made contact, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle and plunging her into darkness. In the pitch-black silence, Ruby could hear the dolls whispering to her, their voices echoing in her ears. They spoke of death and despair, of torment and terror. And then, one by one, the dolls began to move. She reached out a trembling hand to touch one of them, and as soon as her fingers made contact, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle and plunging her into darkness. In the pitch-black silence, Ruby could hear the dolls whispering to her, their voices echoing in her ears. They spoke of death and despair, of torment and terror. And then, one by one, the dolls began to move. Their porcelain limbs creaked and cracked as they came to life, their glass eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Ruby tried to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth as the dolls surrounded her, their tiny hands reaching out to grab her. She felt herself being lifted off the ground, her body paralyzed with fear, as the dolls carried her towards an open doorway, leading to a shadowy staircase. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and Ruby could hear the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the darkness. As she was dragged down the stairs by the haunted dolls, Ruby caught a glimpse of a ghostly figure standing at the bottom. A woman dressed in tattered rags, her eyes hollow and her skin as pale as moonlight. The woman beckoned to Ruby with a bony finger, and in that moment, Ruby knew that she was trapped in a nightmare from which she might never awaken. The haunted dolls pushed Ruby towards the ghostly figure, and as she drew closer, she could see the woman's face contorted in agony. She knew then that the woman was the spirit of the mansion's former owner, driven mad by grief and despair, and now she sought to claim Ruby's soul as her own. As the ghost reached out to touch Ruby, a blinding light erupted from her fingertips, enveloping the room in a dazzling display of ethereal energy. Ruby felt herself being consumed by the light, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving Ruby alone in the darkness once more. The haunted dolls lay scattered on the floor, their glass eyes shattered and their porcelain bodies broken beyond repair. The ghostly figure was gone, and Ruby was left to contemplate the horrors she had witnessed in the abandoned mansion. As she stumbled out of the house and into the stormy night, Ruby knew that she would never be the same again. The haunted dolls and the ghostly presence would haunt her nightmares for eternity, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within the shadows of the world. And so Ruby's curiosity had led her into a nightmare from which there was no escape, a tale of terror and torment that would echo through the ages, the legend of the haunted doll collection and the ghostly figure that dwelled within its walls. But for Ruby, the nightmare was far from over, and she knew that the spirits of the mansion would never rest until they had claimed her soul for their own.